The dust hung thick in the air like a shroud when Finn McClellan first saw her slender, fierce-eyed, with that rope scar circling her neck like a macabre necklace. Montana Territory, 1876, wasn't kind to anyone, least of all a woman traveling alone, but something in the way she held herself told him she'd survived more than most men twice her size. Olivia Blackwood felt the stranger's eyes on her scar before she even saw him. She'd grown accustomed to the stares, had learned to keep her chin high despite them. But when the tall cowboy approached her outside the general store in Silver Creek, his expression wasn't filled with the usual pity or morbid curiosity. "Madam," he said, tipping his worn hat. "Name's Finn McClellan. Couldn't help but notice you seem new to these parts." She adjusted the shawl around her neck reflexively. Just passing through, his eyes, blue as Montana sky, flickered to her throat and back to her face. "That scar," he began. Olivia turned to leave, but his next words stopped her cold. "Not while I'm here," she glanced back. "Excuse me." "Whatever or whoever did that to you," he said, his voice low and steady, "it won't happen again, not while I'm here." Olivia had heard promises before. They'd always broken as easily as dry kindling. Yet something in this stranger's voice made her pause, made her wonder if perhaps this time might be different. "You don't know me, Mr. McClellan," she said, gripping her parcels tighter. "And you don't know what you're offering." "I know enough," he replied, "and I stand by what I said." The wind kicked up, sending dust swirling between them like the ghosts of possibilities neither dared name. Olivia knew better than to trust a stranger's kindness, especially a man's. But winter was approaching, she had nowhere to go, and something in his steady gaze suggested he might be unlike the others who had filled her life with pain. "I need work," she said finally, "and a place to stay." Finn nodded as if he'd expected nothing less. "My ranch is 3 miles west. Could use help with cooking and such. Got a small cabin for hired help that's sitting empty. I don't need charity." "Good, because I'm not offering any, just fair work for fair pay." He paused. "And maybe a place where you won't have to look over your shoulder every minute." Olivia studied him, searching for the lie, for the hidden intent she'd learned to detect in men's offers. She found only directness in his weathered face, and perhaps something else, a kindness that didn't demand anything in return. "I can cook," she said at last. "And I'm not afraid of hard work." "Never doubted it for a minute, madam." He gestured toward his wagon. "I'm heading back now if you'd like to come along." Against her better judgment, Olivia nodded. As they rode west into the setting sun, the mountains purple against the horizon, she kept one hand near the small knife hidden in her pocket. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. But Finn McClellan had seen the mark of her past and promised protection instead of judgment. In a world that had shown her little mercy, it was enough to make her wonder if perhaps she might find something more than just employment at his ranch. She just wasn't sure if she was brave enough to find out. The journey to Finn's ranch passed in relative silence. Olivia wasn't one for idle chatter, and Finn seemed to respect that, focusing instead on guiding his team of horses along the rutted trail. The wagon creaked and swayed beneath them, a rhythmic counterpoint to the clip-clop of hooves. "Place isn't much," Finn said as they crested a small rise. Below them stretched a modest ranch, a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, corrals, and a few outbuildings. A creek wound through the property, bordered by cottonwoods just beginning to turn golden with autumn. "But it's mine, paid for it with 8 years of driving cattle. It looks—" Olivia searched for the right word. "Peaceful." Finn gave a short laugh. "Most days, though the cattle might disagree." As they approached, a large dog came bounding toward them, barking enthusiastically. "That's Buck," Finn said. "Don't worry, he's all noise." "I'm not afraid of dogs," Olivia replied. Indeed, she'd always found animals more trustworthy than people. They pulled up before the main house, and Finn jumped down, coming around to offer Olivia his hand. She hesitated only briefly before accepting it, noticing the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. "Finn, didn't expect you back so soon," a voice called from the porch. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and a kind face stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Leary," Finn acknowledged with a nod. "Found us some help in town. This is Miss," he paused, realizing he'd never asked her full name. "Blackwood," Olivia supplied. "Olivia Blackwood." "Well, Miss Blackwood, welcome to Willow Creek Ranch," Mrs. Leary said. "I'm Frances Leary, housekeeper and cook, though my bones aren't what they used to be, which is why Mr. McClellan's been pestering me to find some help." "Miss Blackwood will be taking the helper's cabin," Finn said. "Could you show her over there while I unload the supplies?" "Of course, Mrs. Leary said. "Come along, dear. You must be tired from your journey." Olivia followed, acutely aware of Finn watching them go. The helper's cabin turned out to be a small but solid structure near the main house, one room with a bed, table, chair, and small stove. "It's not fancy, Mrs. Leary said, but it's clean. I put fresh linens on just last week, hoping we'd find someone soon." She paused, eyes briefly flicking to Olivia's neck before quickly moving away. "Dinner's at 6 in the main house. Gives you time to settle in." "Thank you," Olivia said, setting down her small bag, all she had left in the world. "Mr. McClellan's a good man," Mrs. Leary added unexpectedly. "Not like some in these parts." With that cryptic statement, she left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone at last, Olivia sank onto the bed, allowing herself a moment of weakness as she pressed trembling hands to her face. 3 weeks she'd been running. 3 weeks since she'd escaped the nightmare that had nearly ended her life. The rope scar throbbed with phantom pain as the memories threatened to overwhelm her. A knock at the door startled her back to the present. She composed herself quickly before opening it to find Finn standing there with her other bag. "Forgot this in the wagon," he said, handing it over. His eyes were concerned. "You all right?" "Just tired," she lied. He nodded, not pushing. "Well, rest up. Tomorrow I'll show you around, get you acquainted with how things run here." He hesitated. "Miss Blackwood, Olivia," she corrected. If she was going to be living here, formality seemed pointless. "Olivia," he repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her heart beat a little faster. "I meant what I said in town. You're safe here." She met his gaze directly. "Mr. McClellan." "Finn," he interrupted with the ghost of a smile. "Finn," she acknowledged. "I appreciate the sentiment, but you should know I may bring trouble with me." His expression didn't change. "Trouble's nothing new around here." "This kind might be," she warned. "Whatever it is, we'll face it," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to align himself with her problems. "Get some rest." After he left, Olivia stood in the doorway for a long time, watching as he walked back to the main house. The setting sun cast his tall figure in silhouette, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than fear or numbness stirring inside her. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable. But as the Montana dusk deepened around her, Olivia couldn't quite suppress the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, she had found a place where she could finally stop running. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. Olivia woke early, having slept better than she had in weeks despite the unfamiliar bed. She dressed quickly in her plain calico dress, pinning her dark hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. The scar was visible this way, but she was tired of hiding. When she arrived at the main house, she found Mrs. Leary already at work in the kitchen, kneading dough with practiced hands. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted. "Coffee's hot if you'd like some." "Thank you," Olivia said, pouring herself a cup. "What can I help with?" "Biscuits are nearly done. Could you start on the eggs? Men'll be coming in from morning chores soon, hungry as wolves." Olivia set to work, falling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. It felt good to have something to do with her hands, to focus on simple tasks rather than fear. Sure enough, within 20 minutes the kitchen door swung open and 3 men entered Finn, followed by 2 ranch hands. "Morning, ladies," Finn said, removing his hat. "Miss Blackwood, this is Owen Riley and Patrick Donovan. Boys, Miss Olivia Blackwood, who'll be helping Mrs. Leary from now on." The men nodded politely, though Olivia didn't miss their curious glances at her neck. To their credit, neither commented. "Sit, all of you," Mrs. Leary commanded, "before everything gets cold." Breakfast was a surprisingly comfortable affair. The men discussed the day's work: cattle to be moved, fences to be mended, while Mrs. Leary kept the coffee coming. Olivia mostly listened, offering a comment here and there when directly addressed. "Miss Blackwood," Finn said as the meal wound down, "thought I'd show you around the place after breakfast if you're amenable." "I'd like that," she replied. An hour later they walked side by side across the ranch, Finn pointing out the various buildings and features of the property. The air was crisp, the sky impossibly blue, and despite herself, Olivia felt a sense of peace stealing over her. "How long have you had this place?" she asked as they paused by the corral where several horses watched them curiously. "Going on 5 years now," Finn answered. "Worked as a trail boss for a cattle company before that, saved every penny." His expression turned reflective. "Always wanted a place of my own, somewhere that couldn't be taken away." Olivia understood that sentiment all too well. It's beautiful land. "It can be hard, especially in winter, but worth it." He glanced at her. "What about you? Where are you from originally?" She stiffened slightly. "Back east, Pennsylvania." Finn seemed to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "Long way from home." "This is home now," she said firmly. "Or at least it's where I am." He nodded, accepting her boundaries. "Well, that's the grand tour. Not much to it, but it's honest work." He paused. "Speaking of which, I should get back to it. Feel free to settle in, help Mrs. Leary as you see fit. We usually have dinner around sunset." As he turned to go, Olivia surprised herself by calling after him. "Finn!" He looked back, one eyebrow raised in question. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement. "My pleasure, Miss Blackwood." Watching him walk away, Olivia felt something unfamiliar flutter in her chest. It had been so long since anyone had shown her simple kindness without expecting something in return. So long since she'd felt anything close to safe. But safety was an illusion, she reminded herself sternly. Frank Harlow was still out there, and he wasn't a man who forgave those who defied him, especially not his wife who'd run away. Her hand went unconsciously to the scar on her neck. No, Frank wouldn't have given up searching for her. It was only a matter of time before he found her. And when he did, Finn McClellan's promise of "not while I'm here" would be put to the ultimate test. The days fell into a rhythm at Willow Creek Ranch. Olivia rose with the sun, helped prepare meals, tended the small kitchen garden, mended clothes, and gradually took over more of Mrs. Leary's duties as the older woman's arthritis worsened with the approaching winter. The work was honest and satisfying, and for the first time in years, Olivia felt useful, valued for her skills rather than merely tolerated for her obedience. Finn was often busy with ranch work, but their paths crossed regularly. At meals, he'd ask about her day with genuine interest. Sometimes in the evenings, they'd sit on the porch together, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. They rarely spoke during these times, but the silence between them was comfortable rather than strained. "You're good for him," Mrs. Leary commented one afternoon as she and Olivia preserved the last of the season's apples. "Haven't seen him this settled in years." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're just friendly." Mrs. Leary gave her a knowing look. "If you say so, dear." After a pause, she added more gently, "Whatever you're running from, and don't look surprised, I recognize the signs. It doesn't define you, not here." Olivia's hands stilled on the apple she was peeling. "Some things can't be outrun." "Maybe not," the older woman conceded, "but they can be faced, especially when you don't have to face them alone." Before Olivia could respond, the kitchen door opened and Finn entered, bringing with him the scent of autumn air and honest work. "Ladies," he greeted, removing his hat. "Something smells mighty fine in here." "Apple preserves," Mrs. Leary informed him. "Though you'll not be getting any if you track mud on my clean floor, Finn McClellan," he grinned, backing up to remove his boots. "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Leary." His eyes met Olivia's, warm and appreciative. "How's your day been, Miss Blackwood?" "Pleasant," she replied, suddenly very aware of the loose strand of hair that had escaped her bun. "And yours?" "Better now," he said simply, causing that now familiar flutter in her chest. Mrs. Leary cleared her throat pointedly. "If you two are done making eyes at each other, there's work to be finished before dinner." Finn laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Yes, madam. Actually came to tell you I'm riding into town tomorrow for supplies. Thought maybe Miss Blackwood might want to come along, pick out some material for new curtains for her cabin." Olivia hesitated. Town meant people, questions, the possibility of word getting back to Frank. But it also meant a chance to get things she needed, and the thought of spending a day with Finn away from the ranch was undeniably appealing. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. "Good," he nodded, seeming pleased. "We'll leave after breakfast." That night, Olivia lay awake in her small cabin, listening to the wind through the trees outside. In just over a month, she had begun to feel something like happiness here. The constant fear that had been her companion for so long had receded to a dull awareness rather than sharp terror. And then there was Finn. Kind, steady Finn who never pushed, never demanded, who looked at her as if she were whole rather than broken. She found herself thinking of him more often than was wise, wondering what it might be like to be held in those strong arms, to feel his lips against hers. Such thoughts were dangerous. Even if Frank never found her a possibility that seemed increasingly remote with each passing day she wasn't free. Legally, she was still married, still bound to a man who had nearly killed her. What could she possibly offer someone like Finn, except complications and danger? Still, as sleep finally claimed her, her dreams were filled not with nightmares of the past, but possibilities of the future, all of them featuring a certain blue-eyed rancher who had promised her safety when she'd least expected it. The trip to Silver Creek, the next day, was filled with a nervous excitement Olivia hadn't felt in years. Finn had hitched the wagon early, and they set off just as the sun was burning away the morning mist that clung to the valley floor. "Beautiful morning," Finn commented, guiding the horses with practiced ease. "It is," Olivia agreed, breathing deeply of the crisp autumn air. She'd worn her best dress for the occasion, a dark blue calico that brought out the deeper tones in her chestnut hair. The dress had a high collar that mostly concealed her scar, a concession to the curious eyes she knew they'd encounter in town. "Mrs. Leary gave me quite a list," Finn said with a chuckle. "You'd think we were preparing for a siege rather than winter." "Better to be overprepared than caught short," Olivia replied. "Winters in Montana territory can be brutal, I hear." You haven't experienced one yet, she shook her head. I arrived in the territory in late spring. Finn nodded, not pressing for details she wasn't ready to give. That was one of the things she appreciated most about him, his respect for her privacy, even as she sensed his curiosity. Well, your first Montana winter's something to behold, he said. Beautiful and harsh in equal measure. Like many things in life, she murmured. He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. Suppose that's true enough. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic creaking of the wagon and the steady clop of hooves the only sounds between them. Miss Blackwood Olivia, Finn began after a time, his voice more serious. I've been meaning to ask you something. Her heart quickened. Yes, are you expecting someone to come looking for you? The question caught her off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Finn was observant. He'd surely noticed how she tensed whenever riders approached the ranch, how she scanned the horizon when outside. Why do you ask? She hedged. Because you're afraid, he said simply. Not all the time, not like when you first arrived, but it's there, just under the surface. He looked at her directly. And I'd like to know what or who I'm up against when they come. When not if, she noted. I'm a realist, he replied. And you're a woman worth looking for. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, warmed her despite her apprehension. My husband, she admitted finally, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Frank Harlow. Finn's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the reins. He's the one who gave you that scar. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, you ran away. After he tried to hang me, she said, her voice steady despite the horror of the memory. Because I lost our child. Finn's intake of breath was sharp. Good God, Olivia. He'd been drinking, she continued, the words coming faster now that she'd started. He'd been cruel before, but never like that. He blamed me for the miscarriage, said I'd done it deliberately. I hadn't, of course I wanted that baby more than anything. She swallowed hard. He dragged me out to the old oak behind our house, threw a rope over a branch. You don't have to tell me, Finn said softly. I want to, she realized. I need to. She touched her neck gently. He hoisted me up, but the branch broke Providence or luck, I don't know which. I was barely conscious, but I managed to get away while he was cursing the broken branch. Ran to a neighbor's farm, hid in their barn till morning. They helped me get to the next town, gave me some money. I've been running ever since. The wagon had slowed almost to a stop as Finn listened, his face a storm of emotions. If I ever meet this husband of yours, he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet, he's a dead man. He's dangerous, Finn, she warned. And I'm still legally his wife. He has rights to me under the law. No man has the right to treat another human being that way, law be damned, Finn replied firmly. And if he comes to my land looking for you, he'll find out exactly how I feel about those so-called rights. The vehemence in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel protected in a way she hadn't since childhood. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Taking these risks for someone you barely know. Finn was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. When I was a boy, he said finally, my mother died of fever, left me and my sister with our father, who took to the bottle hard after losing her. He wasn't a bad man by nature, but grief and whiskey made him mean. Olivia listened intently, sensing this wasn't a story he shared often. One night he came home in a rage, started beating on my sister, something terrible. I was 14, too small to stop him. Our neighbor, old man Davis, heard the commotion and came over. He pulled my father off her, stood between them, and said words I never forgot. Not while I'm here, Wilson. Not while I'm here. Finn's blue eyes met hers, intense with meaning. Davis took us in that night, kept us safe until my father sobered up and came to his senses. made me realize that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to stand up and say enough. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. And now you're being that person for me. Trying to be, he corrected. I couldn't save my mother, couldn't protect my sister until someone showed me how. But I can do this, I can keep you safe, Olivia, if you'll let me. The wagon had come to a complete stop now, the horses grazing idly at the roadside grass. Without conscious thought, Olivia reached out and placed her hand over Finn's where it rested on his knee. I'm letting you, she whispered. For a charged moment they stayed like that, connected by touch and shared understanding. Then Finn gently turned his hand to clasp hers, his calloused palm warm against her skin. We should get moving, he said softly. Town's not far now. As they continued their journey, Olivia's hand remained in his, a small act of trust that felt larger than any words could express. Silver Creek had grown since Olivia's brief visit a month earlier. New construction dotted the main street, and more people hustled about their business. The town was growing with the territory, becoming a hub for the surrounding ranches and farms. Finn pulled the wagon up in front of the general store. We'll start here, he said, jumping down and coming around to help Olivia descend. His hands at her waist were strong and respectful, lingering only a moment longer than necessary. The store was busy, filled with ranchers and townspeople stocking up before winter set in. Olivia kept close to Finn, uncomfortable with the curious glances that came her way. A new woman in these parts was always cause for interest, especially one as striking as Olivia, despite her efforts to appear plain. Mr. McClellan, the proprietor called out. Good to see you. Stocking up for winter, I expect. That's right, Mr. Jameson, Finn replied amiably. Got quite a list from Mrs. Leary. And who's this lovely lady? Mr. Jameson asked, peering at Olivia with undisguised curiosity. Miss Olivia Blackwood, Finn introduced. She's helping out at Willow Creek. Pleasure to meet you, Miss, Jameson said. Any friend of Finn's is welcome here. Olivia nodded politely. Thank you. While Finn discussed his order with Jameson, Olivia browsed the store, admiring the bolts of fabric and examining household goods. She selected a pretty blue and white checked material for curtains, along with some plain muslin for everyday use. That'll look nice in your cabin, Finn commented, appearing at her side. I thought so, she agreed. Makes it feel more like home. His expression softened. I'm glad you're feeling that way about Willow Creek. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something warm and full of possibility that made Olivia's heart race. The moment was broken by a loud voice near the door. Well, if it isn't Finn McClellan. Heard you've been hiding out at that ranch of yours all summer. Olivia turned to see a tall, well-dressed man entering the store, flanked by two rough-looking companions. There was something in his bearing that immediately put her on edge, a swagger that spoke of entitlement rather than earned confidence. Hartley, Finn acknowledged coolly. Not hiding. Working. Always the dedicated rancher, Hartley said with a smirk, his eyes shifting to Olivia. And who might this be, Miss Blackwood? Finn said, stepping slightly in front of her. Miss Blackwood, this is Victor Hartley, owns the big spread east of town. Blackwood Ranch, Hartley corrected. Largest cattle operation in the county. He gave Olivia an appraising look that made her skin crawl. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Blackwood. New to our little community. Yes, she replied simply, offering nothing more. Miss Blackwood works for me, Finn interjected firmly. Does she now? Hartley's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, if you ever decide you'd prefer employment at a more substantial establishment, my offer stands. She's quite happy where she is, Finn said before Olivia could respond. Hartley's expression hardened slightly. I wasn't asking you, McClellan. Olivia straightened, meeting Hartley's gaze directly. Mr. McClellan spoke truthfully. I am quite content with my current position, but thank you for the offer. Hartley looked between them, his eyes narrowing speculatively. I see. Well, perhaps we'll see you at the harvest dance next weekend. The whole county attends even small operations like Willow Creek. He emphasized the word small with obvious disdain. Perhaps, Finn replied noncommittally. With a mocking tip of his hat, Hartley moved toward the back of the store, his men following closely. Pleasant fellow, Olivia murmured once they were out of earshot. Finn's jaw was tight. Victor Hartley thinks he owns everything and everyone in this county. Has his eye on Willow Creek, makes no secret he wants to absorb it into his holdings. I take it you're not interested in selling. Not if he was the last buyer on Earth, Finn confirmed. Man's ruthless, doesn't care who he hurts to get what he wants. The description sent a chill through Olivia, reminding her too much of Frank. He seems dangerous, he can be, Finn admitted. Best to steer clear when possible. He glanced at her purchases. Got everything you need. She nodded, and they completed their transaction, adding her items to Finn's larger order. As they left the store, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling of Hartley's eyes following them, calculating and cold. They visited several other establishments, the blacksmith for some repairs, the apothecary for medicines Mrs. Leary had requested. By midday, they stopped at the small cafe for lunch. You're quiet, Finn observed as they waited for their food. Just thinking, Olivia replied, about Hartley. She shook her head, about how complicated life can be. 1 month ago, I was sleeping in barns, terrified of every shadow. Now I'm sitting in a cafe having lunch with. She trailed off, unsure how to define what Finn was to her. A friend, he supplied with a small smile. Yes, she agreed, though the word seemed inadequate for the connection growing between them. A friend. Their food arrived, simple fare of beef stew and fresh bread, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Finn, Olivia began hesitantly, what Hartley said about the harvest dance. You don't have to go, he assured her quickly. It's just a local tradition, nothing important. Actually, I was wondering if you would take me, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. If you were planning to attend, that is. Finn looked up, clearly caught off guard. I wasn't, but a slow smile spread across his face. I'd be honored to escort you, Miss Blackwood. The pleasure in his expression warmed her more than the stew. Good, she said softly. After lunch, they completed their errands and began the journey home, the wagon considerably more loaded than when they'd arrived. As they left town, Olivia felt both lighter and heavier for having shared her past with Finn. Heavier with the awareness that her feelings for him were growing into something she might not be able to control. What she didn't notice was the man watching them from the shadows beside the saloon, a drifter who had arrived in Silver Creek just that morning, asking questions about a woman with chestnut hair and a scar around her neck. The week leading up to the harvest dance passed in a flurry of activity. Winter preparations intensified as the temperature dropped, frost appearing each morning and lingering longer into the day. The men worked from dawn to dusk, securing buildings, repairing fences, and ensuring the livestock would be well protected from the coming snow. Olivia, meanwhile, threw herself into domestic preparations with equal vigor. She and Mrs. Leary put up preserves, smoked meat, and stored root vegetables in the root cellar beneath the main house. In her spare moments, Olivia worked on a new dress for the dance, adapting one of her plainer garments with some of the fabric she'd purchased in town. You've got quite the talent with a needle, Mrs. Leary commented, watching Olivia add delicate embroidery to the bodice one evening by the fire. That's going to be lovely. Thank you, Olivia replied, pleased with the compliment. "I've always enjoyed sewing. My mother taught me when I was a girl." "Finn won't be able to take his eyes off you," the older woman said with a knowing smile. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Mrs. Leary?" "Oh, don't Mrs. Leary me," she chuckled. "I've seen how you two look at each other when you think no one's watching. Reminds me of me and my Thomas, God rest his soul." "It's complicated," Olivia said softly, setting down her sewing. Mrs. Leary's expression softened. "Because of your husband, the one who gave you that scar." Olivia's hand flew to her neck. "How did you, dear girl? I've lived a long time, seen things." She reached over to pat Olivia's hand. "Finn told me a little, not details, just enough so I'd understand if you seemed skittish sometimes." Rather than feeling betrayed by this revelation, Olivia felt relieved. "Then you know why nothing can happen between Finn and me. I'm still married in the eyes of the law. Laws can be changed, or broken when they are unjust," Mrs. Leary said pragmatically. "And a marriage that nearly ends with murder isn't much of a marriage at all, if you ask me." "Even so," Olivia sighed, "I'd only bring danger to Finn's door. Frank won't give up looking for me." "Finn McClellan can handle himself," Mrs. Leary said confidently. "And he cares for you more than cares, I'd wager. Don't throw away a chance at happiness because you're afraid of what might happen." Olivia considered the older woman's words as she returned to her sewing. Was she letting fear dictate her choices? After spending so long running, the idea of standing firm, of fighting for something rather than fleeing from it, was both terrifying and exhilarating. On the day of the harvest dance, the entire household bustled with anticipation. Even Owen and Patrick, the ranch hands, were planning to attend, having pressed their best shirts and polished their boots for the occasion. Olivia spent extra time with her preparations, washing her hair and pinning it up in a more elaborate style than her usual practical knot. The dress had turned out beautifully, a deep green that complemented her complexion, with delicate embroidery at the bodice and cuffs. The neckline was higher than fashion dictated, but it covered her scar completely. When she emerged from her cabin at the appointed hour, Finn was waiting for her beside the wagon, dressed in his Sunday best, a dark coat, clean shirt, and string tie. He'd clearly made an effort to tame his usually windswept hair, and his boots shone with fresh polish. He stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Is something wrong?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "No," he said quickly, finding his voice. "No, quite the opposite. You look beautiful, Olivia." The simple sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." He offered his arm with a small bow that was half playful, half genuine. "Shall we?" The ride to town was filled with a pleasant tension, a sense of possibility that hung between them like the golden leaves still clinging to the aspen trees. Mrs. Leary rode with them, chatting about dances from years past, but Olivia was acutely aware of Finn beside her, his thigh occasionally brushing hers as the wagon swayed over rough patches in the road. Silver Creek was transformed when they arrived. Lanterns hung from every building, casting a warm glow over the main street. The Grange Hall, a large building at the end of town, blazed with light and sound. Fiddle music spilled from its open doors, along with laughter and the stomping of dancing feet. "Quite the gathering," Finn commented as he helped first Mrs. Leary, then Olivia down from the wagon. "Looks like the whole county turned out." Inside, the hall was decorated with autumn bounty, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorned every surface. Long tables laden with food lined one wall, while a small group of musicians played lively tunes on a raised platform at the far end. Couples whirled across the wooden floor, faces flushed with exertion and enjoyment. "Finn, you made it after all." A jovial man approached, clapping Finn on the shoulder. And with such lovely company, too. Sheriff Davis, Finn greeted him. Miss Blackwood, this is Sheriff Thomas Davis. Sheriff, Miss Olivia Blackwood. Olivia recognized the name immediately. This must be the son of the man who had helped Finn and his sister years ago. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Blackwood, the sheriff said, tipping his hat. Hope this wild cowboy of ours is treating you right. He is, thank you, she replied with a smile. Tom's father was the neighbor I told you about, Finn explained quietly. Tom followed in his footsteps, looking out for folks who need it. The sheriff's expression turned more serious. Speaking of which, Finn, might have a word when you get a chance. Nothing urgent, just something you should know about. Finn frowned slightly. Everything all right, like I said, nothing that can't wait, Davis assured him. Enjoy the dance first. Miss Blackwood, I hope you'll save one for me as an old friend of Finn's. Of course, she agreed politely. As the sheriff moved away to greet other arrivals, Finn turned to Olivia. Would you like something to drink? Or perhaps, he hesitated, then extended his hand. Would you care to dance? Olivia placed her hand in his, heart fluttering. I'd love to. The musicians were playing a lively reel, and Finn led her confidently onto the floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her through the steps with ease despite his usual outdoor occupation. Where did you learn to dance like this? She asked as he spun her. My mother before she passed, he replied. She always said a gentleman should know how to dance properly. He guided her through a turn. You're quite accomplished yourself. Another lifetime, she said simply. They danced through 2 more songs before taking a break for refreshments. Olivia was flushed and laughing, more carefree than she'd felt in years. Throughout the evening, she was introduced to neighbors and townspeople, all curious about the new woman at Willow Creek Ranch, but welcoming in their way. Everyone's been so kind, she commented as she and Finn stood by the refreshment table, cups of punch in hand. Good people, mostly, Finn agreed. The kind who help each other through hard times. McClellan, a familiar voice interrupted, decided to grace us with your presence after all. Victor Hartley approached, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit that set him apart from the more modest attire of most attendees. His eyes lingered on Olivia in a way that made her instinctively move closer to Finn. Hartley, Finn acknowledged with a curt nod. Miss Blackwood, Hartley said, taking her hand before she could object and bringing it to his lips. That color suits you beautifully. Perhaps you'd honor me with the next dance. Olivia gently but firmly withdrew her hand. Thank you, but I believe I promised the next dance to Sheriff Davis. As if on cue, the sheriff appeared at her side. Indeed you did, Miss Blackwood. If you'll excuse us, gentlemen. Grateful for the timely rescue, Olivia allowed Davis to lead her onto the dance floor, leaving Finn and Hartley in what appeared to be a tense conversation. Thank you, she said quietly as they began to dance. Don't mention it, the sheriff replied good-naturedly. Saw Hartley moving in and figured you might appreciate an exit. Man doesn't take no well. So I gathered, Olivia replied. You've known Finn a long time. All my life, Davis confirmed. He's a good man, best I know, in fact. He studied her face for a moment. He cares for you a great deal. Olivia flushed. We've only known each other a short while. Sometimes that's all it takes, Davis said with a knowing smile. My father used to say you can measure a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. By that measure, Finn's worth more than all of Hartley's gold. I believe that, Olivia said softly. When the dance ended, Davis escorted her back to Finn, who looked relieved to see her. Hartley had moved on, now chatting with a group of well-dressed ranchers across the room. Everything all right? She asked, noting the tension in Finn's jaw. Fine, he assured her, his expression softening as he looked at her. Would you like to step outside for some air? It's getting warm in here. The night air was crisp and cool, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. Finn led her to a small bench at the side of the building, away from the few couples also seeking respite from the crowded hall. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked as they sat. "More than I expected," she admitted. "It's been a long time since I've done anything like this." "You deserve evenings like this," Finn said quietly. Laughter dancing, no looking over your shoulder. Olivia smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "It's a beautiful dream." "It doesn't have to be just a dream," he said, his voice low and intense. He turned slightly to face her, taking her hand in his. "Olivia, I know it's complicated. I know there are obstacles. But these past weeks, having you at Willow Creek," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "You've brought something to my life I didn't even know was missing." Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "Finn, I'm not asking for promises," he continued. "Just a chance. A chance to see if what's growing between us might become something more." In the silver moonlight, his face was open, vulnerable in a way few men would allow themselves to be. Olivia knew she should refuse him, should protect him from the danger that followed her. But in that moment, she couldn't find the strength to deny what her heart so desperately wanted. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd like that chance too." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward. Their lips met in a kiss so gentle, it brought tears to her eyes, a promise. A beginning, a fragile hope neither dared name. When they parted, Finn reached up to touch her cheek, brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I won't let anyone hurt you again," he vowed softly. "Not while I'm here." Olivia wanted to believe him with every fiber of her being, but as she looked over his shoulder toward the street, her blood turned to ice. A man stood in the shadows across the way, watching them, a man whose silhouette was burned into her nightmares. Frank had found her. Finn felt Olivia stiffen beneath his touch, saw the color drain from her face as she stared past him into the darkness. "What is it?" he asked, turning to follow her gaze. "Olivia, he's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Frank, my husband." Finn's head snapped around, scanning the street, but the figure Olivia had seen had already melted away into the shadows between buildings. "Are you sure?" he asked, though he could see the truth in her terrified eyes. She nodded, beginning to tremble. "I'd know him anywhere." Finn stood, instinctively placing himself between Olivia and the direction she'd been looking. "Stay here," he instructed. "I'll get the sheriff." "No." She grabbed his arm, panic evident in her voice. "Don't leave me alone, please." The fear in her eyes tore at his heart. "All right," he agreed, helping her to her feet. "We'll go together. Stay close." With a protective arm around her waist, Finn guided Olivia back into the Grange Hall, scanning the crowd for Sheriff Davis. The music and laughter continued unabated, the festive atmosphere now a jarring contrast to the dread that had descended upon them. They found Davis near the punch bowl, engaged in conversation with the town doctor. "Tom," Finn interrupted urgently. "Need a word. Now." The sheriff immediately excused himself, recognizing the seriousness in Finn's tone. "What's happened?" "Is there somewhere we can talk privately?" Finn asked, glancing meaningfully at Olivia, who was visibly shaking despite her efforts to remain composed. Davis nodded. "My office. This way." They slipped out a side door and hurried across the street to the sheriff's office, a small but solid building with barred windows and a heavy oak door. Once inside, Davis locked the door behind them and lit an additional lamp. "Now, what's this about?" he asked, concern evident in his face. "Olivia's husband is in town," Finn said grimly. "The one who tried to kill her." Davis's expression hardened. You're certain? I saw him, Olivia confirmed, her voice steadier than Finn would have expected. Watching us from across the street. This would be Frank Harlow, Davis asked. Finn and Olivia exchanged a surprised glance. How did you know that? Finn demanded. The sheriff sighed. That's what I wanted to talk to you about earlier. Had a stranger in town asking questions yesterday looking for a woman matching Miss Blackwood's description, specifically mentioning a scar on her neck. Said he was her brother, worried about her welfare after she'd run off. Davis shook his head. Something didn't sit right with me, so I did some digging. Found out he'd been asking similar questions in 3 other towns heading this way. It's him, Olivia whispered. He's found me. What's he look like, this Frank Harlow? Davis asked. Tall, she replied. Broad-shouldered. Dark hair and beard. There's a scar through his right eyebrow from a bar fight, her voice faltered. Cold eyes, the coldest you've ever seen. Davis nodded grimly. Sounds like our stranger. Been staying at the boarding house since yesterday. Finn's hands clenched into fists. I'll deal with him. No, Davis said firmly. This is a matter for the law, Finn. The law, Finn scoffed. The same law that says she's his property. That gives him the right to drag her back to Pennsylvania even after he tried to hang her. I didn't say I was on his side, Davis replied evenly. Just that we need to handle this properly. He turned to Olivia. Miss Blackwood, would you be willing to swear out a complaint against your husband for attempted murder? Olivia looked uncertain. Would it matter? It would be my word against his. And it happened in Pennsylvania, not Montana territory. Murder's murder, no matter where it happens, Davis said. And attempted murder's still a crime, if you're willing to testify and put a target on her back, Finn interrupted. You know as well as I do that a wife testifying against her husband is practically unheard of. Even if a judge would hear it, what happens after? He'd find a way to get to her. Davis sighed, running a hand through his hair. What do you suggest, then? Before Finn could respond, a knock came at the door. All 3 of them tensed. Sheriff, you in there? A familiar voice called Mrs. Leary. Davis unlocked the door, revealing the housekeeper looking worried. Have you seen? Oh, thank goodness, she exclaimed, spotting Finn and Olivia. I've been looking everywhere for you too. The dance is nearly over, and she stopped, noticing their grave expressions. What's happened? Quickly, Finn explained the situation. Mrs. Leary's face darkened with each word. That monster, she muttered. Well, he can't have her. We won't allow it. It's not that simple, Mrs. Leary, Davis began. Isn't it? The older woman challenged. A man tries to murder his wife, tracks her halfway across the country to do God knows what, and we're supposed to stand aside because of some legal technicality. The law, Davis tried again. Sometimes the law is wrong, Finn stated flatly. You know that as well as I do, Tom. A tense silence fell over the room. Olivia, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke. I won't go back with him, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. I'll die first. It won't come to that, Finn promised, moving to her side and taking her hand. I meant what I said earlier, not while I'm here. Davis watched them, conflict evident in his face. Finally, he sighed heavily. All right, here's what we'll do. Finn, you take Olivia and Mrs. Leary back to Willow Creek tonight. I'll keep an eye on Harlow, make sure he doesn't follow. Tomorrow, I'll ride out and we'll figure out our next steps. And if he comes looking before then? Finn asked. Davis's expression hardened. A man has the right to defend his property and the people on it, even against a lawful husband. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best they could hope for under the circumstances. Finn nodded his agreement. We'll leave now, he decided, through the back if possible. I'll create a distraction at the dance, Mrs. Leary offered. Make it look like you're still there for a while. Davis nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. I'll escort you folks to your wagon and make sure you get out of town safely." As they prepared to leave, Olivia touched Finn's arm. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I've brought this danger to your door just as I feared." Finn covered her hand with his own. "You have nothing to apologize for, nothing at all." The journey back to Willow Creek was tense and silent, each of them scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. Mrs. Leary sat close to Olivia, occasionally patting her hand in wordless comfort. Finn drove the team hard, taking a less traveled route that would make them more difficult to follow. When they finally reached the ranch, Finn's first action was to gather Owen and Patrick, explaining the situation in terse, direct terms. "We'll take shifts keeping watch," he instructed. "Patrick, you take first watch. Owen, relieve him at midnight. I'll take over before dawn." The men nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They'd both grown fond of Olivia during her time at the ranch and were clearly disturbed by the threat to her safety. "What about Miss Blackwood?" Owen asked. "Where will she stay?" Finn considered this. Her cabin, while comfortable, was isolated and difficult to defend. "The main house," he decided. "Mrs. Leary's room is on the ground floor. Olivia can take the guest room upstairs, better visibility, and only one staircase for anyone to come up." "I'll make it up right away, Mrs. Leary said, already moving toward the house. As the others dispersed to their assigned tasks, Finn found himself alone with Olivia for the first time since their kiss, a moment of promise now overshadowed by danger. "You should try to rest," he told her gently. "It's been a long night." Olivia nodded, though they both knew sleep would likely elude her. "Finn," she said hesitantly, "if he comes when he comes, you need to be careful. Frank is. He's not like other men. There's something missing in him. Something that stops the rest of us from doing terrible things." "I understand," Finn assured her, though in truth, he wondered if anyone could truly understand the kind of man who would try to hang his own wife. "But I've faced dangerous men before, and I won't be facing him alone." She studied his face in the moonlight, her expression troubled. "Earlier tonight before I saw him. That was real, wasn't it? What you said, what happened between us?" Finn stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Every word," he confirmed. "Every moment, and none of this changes how I feel." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "It should." "Well, it doesn't," he said firmly. "We'll get through this, Olivia, together, and then we'll figure out the rest." He wanted to kiss her again, to reaffirm the connection they'd found before Frank's shadow had fallen across their evening. But the moment wasn't right, not with fear still bright in her eyes, not with danger possibly lurking in the darkness beyond the ranch house. Instead, he squeezed her hands gently before releasing them. "Come on. Let's get you settled inside." As they walked toward the house, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that this night marked a turning point not just for his relationship with Olivia, but for all of them at Willow Creek Ranch. Whatever peace they'd found in recent weeks had been shattered by Frank Harlow's arrival. But Finn McClellan had made a promise the day he'd first seen that rope scar around Olivia's neck, and he intended to keep it, no matter what the cost. Dawn broke cold and clear over Willow Creek Ranch, painting the mountains with pale gold light. Finn, who had taken over the watch as promised, stood on the front porch of the main house, rifle in hand, scanning the approach road for any sign of movement. He'd barely slept, his mind churning with contingency plans and half-formed strategies. The door opened behind him, and he turned to see Olivia, pale but composed, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders against the morning chill. "You should be resting," he said gently. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, coming to stand beside him, "not knowing he's out there somewhere." Finn nodded his understanding. "Sheriff Davis should be here soon. We'll figure something out." Olivia gazed out at the peaceful landscape, the golden aspen trees, the cattle grazing in the distant fields, the mountains rising majestically against the sky. "It's so beautiful here," she said softly. "I've never felt at home anywhere the way I do at Willow Creek." "It's your home for as long as you want it to be," Finn replied. "No matter what happens." She turned to him, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of emotions. "You can't promise that." "Not with Frank, I can and I do," he interrupted firmly. "Frank Harlow doesn't decide your future, you do." A small smile touched her lips. "When you say it like that, I almost believe it's possible." "It is possible," Finn insisted. "And after Davis gets here," the sound of approaching hoofbeats cut him off. Both of them tensed, Finn instinctively stepping in front of Olivia as he raised his rifle. "Get inside," he instructed quietly. "Finn, please, Olivia." After a moment's hesitation, she complied, though she remained just inside the doorway, unwilling to leave him completely. The rider came into view around the bend in the road, Sheriff Davis, as expected, riding hard. Finn lowered his rifle slightly but remained vigilant until Davis reached the yard and dismounted. "Morning," the sheriff greeted, his expression grave. "Where's Miss Blackwood?" "Here," Olivia said, stepping back onto the porch. Davis removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I've got news, and none of it good. Harlow's gone from the boarding house, left sometime in the night." Finn's grip tightened on his rifle. "He's coming here." "Most likely," Davis agreed, "but there's more. After you folks left last night, I did some more digging, sent some telegrams to contacts back east." He hesitated, glancing at Olivia. "Madam, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it seems your husband has been following a trail of incidents. Women matching your description who have turned up dead in towns along the route west." Olivia swayed slightly, and Finn moved to steady her. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "3 that we know of," Davis replied grimly. "All with marks around their necks. All initially mistaken for suicides, until someone looked closer." Finn felt cold rage building inside him. He's been killing women he thought might be Olivia. "That's how it looks," Davis confirmed. "Which means he's more dangerous than even you suspected, Miss Blackwood. This isn't just a husband looking to reclaim his wife. This is a man who's killed multiple times and won't hesitate to do so again." Olivia's face had gone ashen, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "This is my fault. Those women died because of me." "No," Finn said firmly. "They died because of him, because he's a monster who chose to kill rather than accept that you escaped him." "Finn's right," Davis added. "The responsibility lies with Harlow, not you." She didn't look convinced, but nodded slightly. "What do we do now?" "I've sent telegrams to marshals in the territory," Davis explained. "With multiple murders across state lines, this becomes a federal matter, but it will take time for them to respond, time we may not have. So we prepare," Finn said decisively, "for when he comes." Davis nodded grimly. "I'll stay, help however I can. But you should know legally, my hands are tied until he actually does something. The murders in other territories are enough for the federal marshals, but for me to act here and now." "We understand," Finn said, though the legal constraints chafed at him. "Just having you here helps." As they began discussing defensive preparations, Mrs. Leary emerged from the house, her expression resolute. "Breakfast is ready," she announced. "You'll all need your strength today." Despite the tension, they followed her inside. Owen and Patrick joined them, and over a meal of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, Finn outlined his plan. "Patrick, I want you to take Mrs. Leary into town," he began. "I'll do no such thing," Mrs. Leary interrupted firmly. "My place is here." "Francis," Finn said gently, using her first name, something he rarely did. "This is going to be dangerous. I can't risk—" "I buried my husband and both my sons," she cut in. There's nothing left for me to fear in this world, Finn McClellan. And I'll not abandon Miss Blackwood when she needs every friend she can get. Finn recognized the futility of arguing further. All right, but you stay in the house, away from windows. Of course, she agreed. I'm determined, not foolish. Owen, Patrick, Finn continued, I want you to secure the barn and outbuildings. Make sure there's nowhere for him to hide or take cover if he approaches. The men nodded, their expressions grim but determined. Miss Blackwood, Finn said, turning to Olivia, I think it would be best if you're about to suggest I hide somewhere you can save your breath, she interrupted, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Frank is coming for me. I won't cower while the rest of you risk yourselves on my behalf. Finn wanted to argue, to insist she stay as far from danger as possible, but the resolve in her face told him it would be useless. And perhaps she was right, perhaps facing this threat head-on was what she needed after running for so long. All right, he conceded. But you stay with me or the sheriff at all times. With the plan established, they set about preparing the ranch for Frank Harlow's arrival. Windows were reinforced, weapons checked and positioned strategically throughout the house. Finn sent one of the hands to alert their nearest neighbors, ensuring that reinforcements could be summoned if needed. As the day wore on with no sign of Harlow, the waiting became its own kind of torture. Olivia grew increasingly tense, jumping at every unexpected sound. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered over the mountains, promising an early winter storm. He'll come at night, she said quietly as she and Finn stood by the window, watching the approaching weather. He always preferred the dark. Finn reached for her hand, holding it tightly in his own. We'll be ready. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a desperate intensity. Finn, if something happens, she broke off, unable to complete the thought. Nothing's going to happen to you, he promised. Not while I'm here. That's not what I meant, she whispered. If something happens to you because of me, I couldn't bear it, any of you. She gestured to include Davis, Mrs. Leary, and the ranch hands. You've all become family to me, the only real family I've known in years. Finn felt something catch in his throat at her words. Gently, he raised a hand to her cheek. Then you understand why we can't let him take you, why I can't. She leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly. I'm so tired of being afraid, she admitted. So tired of him having this power over me. After today, he won't, Finn vowed. One way or another, this ends today. As if in response to his words, the first drops of rain began to patter against the window, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming in more ways than one. Night fell early, hastened by the storm clouds that now blanketed the sky. Rain lashed against the windows of the ranch house, and wind howled around the eaves like a living thing. Inside, lamps burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. Finn, Davis, and Olivia sat in the main room, a fire crackling in the hearth to ward off the growing chill. Mrs. Leary had retired to her room at their insistence, though they all knew she was unlikely to be sleeping. Owen and Patrick were positioned elsewhere in the house, keeping watch from different vantage points. Storm works in our favor, Davis commented, checking his revolver for the third time that evening. Hard to approach undetected in weather like this. Unless he uses it as cover, Finn countered, his own rifle across his knees. The rain muffles sound and visibility's poor. Olivia sat slightly apart from them, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She'd been quiet for the past hour, lost in thought or memory. Finn wasn't sure which. Olivia, he said softly. You all right? She looked up, her eyes distant. I was just thinking about the first time, she said. The first time Frank. She touched her neck unconsciously. It wasn't always bad, you know. When we first married, he could be kind in his way, but something in him changed, or maybe it was always there and I just didn't see it. Finn moved to sit beside her, not touching her but close enough to offer comfort if she wanted it. "After I lost the baby," she continued, her voice barely audible over the storm, "he became obsessed with the idea that I'd done it deliberately, that I'd denied him his son out of spite." She shook her head slightly. "As if I hadn't wanted that child with every fiber of my being." Davis shifted uncomfortably, clearly not used to such intimate confessions, but his expression was one of deep sympathy. "The night he tried to hang me," Olivia said, the words coming more steadily now. "He'd been drinking more heavily than usual. Said he was going to make an example of me so that other wives would know their place." A bitter smile touched her lips. "I actually thought he was just going to beat me again. When he dragged me outside to that tree, I still didn't understand what was happening until the rope was around my neck." Finn's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white with the effort of restraining his rage. The idea of anyone treating her that way, of her suffering such terror and pain, was almost more than he could bear. "The branch breaking wasn't Providence," she finished quietly. "It was rot. Frank was too drunk to notice." She looked up, meeting Finn's eyes directly. "I don't believe in miracles, Mr. McClellan, but I do believe in second chances. And whatever happens tonight, you gave me that. All of you did." Before Finn could respond, a sharp whistle came from upstairs, Owen's signal that he'd spotted something. All three of them tensed, Finn and Davis rising to their feet, weapons at the ready. "Stay here," Finn instructed Olivia as he moved swiftly to the window, carefully peering out into the rain-drenched darkness. At first he saw nothing but sheets of rain illuminated by occasional flashes of lightning. Then, during one such flash, he caught a glimpse of movement near the barn, a figure darting between buildings. "He's here," Finn said grimly, "using the outbuildings for cover." Davis moved to another window, scanning the yard. "Can't get a clear shot in this weather." "We don't want to shoot unless absolutely necessary," Finn reminded him. "Federal charges, remember." "Hard to remember legal niceties when a killer's stalking around your property," Davis muttered, but he nodded his agreement. Olivia had risen to her feet, her face pale but composed. "He'll try to get me alone," she said. "That's his way. He doesn't like witnesses." "Well, he's out of luck tonight," Finn replied firmly. "You're not leaving our sight." Another flash of lightning revealed the figure again, closer now, moving toward the house with deliberate purpose. In that brief illumination, Finn caught a glimpse of the man's face, hard, bearded, with eyes that seemed to reflect the lightning's cold fire. "That's him," Olivia whispered, having seen the same. The next moments unfolded with nightmarish speed. A crash from the kitchen, followed by Patrick's shout of warning, cut short by the sound of a struggle. Davis immediately moved in that direction while Finn positioned himself between Olivia and the doorway. "Upstairs," he told her urgently. "Get to Owen." She hesitated only briefly before complying, gathering her skirts and hurrying toward the staircase. Finn followed close behind, covering her retreat. They were halfway up the stairs when the main door burst open, revealing Frank Harlow, tall, powerfully built, soaked from the rain and looking every bit the monster Olivia had described. In his hand was a revolver, already trained on Finn. "Step aside," Harlow commanded, his voice surprisingly calm. "My quarrel's not with you, Cowboy, just with my wayward wife." Finn remained where he was, shielding Olivia with his body. "Your wife isn't here," he said evenly. "Just a free woman who doesn't belong to you or anyone else." Harlow's laugh was cold and utterly without humor. "That right? Well, the law says different, and so do I." His eyes shifted to Olivia, visible over Finn's shoulder. "Hello, Liv. Been a long chase, hasn't it? Time to come home now." "I am home," Olivia replied, her voice stronger than Finn would have expected. "And I'm never going anywhere with you again." Harlow's expression darkened. "Still haven't learned your lesson, I see. Maybe I need to teach it to your new friend here instead." He aimed the revolver more deliberately at Finn. "Last chance. Step aside or I put a bullet in you right now." Finn didn't move. "Not while I'm here," he said, repeating the promise he'd made the day they met. "You don't touch her, not ever again." For a moment, the only sounds were the storm outside and the heavy breathing of the three people locked in this deadly tableau. Then, from the kitchen doorway, Sheriff Davis appeared, his own weapon trained on Harlow. "Drop the gun, Harlow," Davis ordered. "You're under arrest for the murder of 3 women across the territories and the attempted murder of your wife." Harlow's eyes flickered to Davis, then back to Finn and Olivia. A calculating look crossed his face. "Think you got me boxed in, do you? Think again." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Harlow swung his gun toward Davis, firing once. The sheriff ducked, returning fire as he fell. Harlow, hit but not down, swung back toward the stairs, firing wildly as Finn pushed Olivia down and covered her with his body. Finn felt a searing pain in his shoulder but ignored it, drawing his own revolver and firing twice. Harlow staggered backward, blood blooming on his chest, a look of genuine surprise crossing his face. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, he crumpled to the floor, his gun clattering uselessly beside him. For a moment, no one moved. Then Olivia was scrambling from beneath Finn, her hands frantically checking his wound. "You're hit," she gasped. "Oh God, Finn." "I'm all right," he assured her, though the pain was intensifying by the second. "Check the sheriff." Davis was already pushing himself to his feet, wincing but otherwise unharmed. "Bullet grazed my arm," he reported, moving cautiously toward Harlow's still form. He knelt, checking for a pulse, then looked up at Finn and Olivia. "He's dead." Olivia's hand stilled on Finn's shoulder. "Dead," she repeated, as if the word didn't quite make sense to her. "It's over, Olivia," Finn said gently, covering her blood-stained hand with his own. "It's really over." She looked at him, then at the body of the man who had terrorized her for so long, and something seemed to break inside her. With a sob that seemed torn from the depths of her soul, she collapsed against Finn's chest, years of fear and pain finding release at last. He held her with his good arm, murmuring soft words of comfort as she wept. Over her head, his eyes met Davis's, and an understanding passed between them. There would be questions, investigations, perhaps even charges to face. But for now, in this moment, none of that mattered. Frank Harlow was dead, and Olivia Blackwood was finally, truly free. The aftermath unfolded like a dream, or perhaps more accurately, like the hazy awakening from a nightmare that had lasted far too long. The storm passed, as storms always do, leaving behind a washed clean world that seemed somehow brighter despite the darkness that had preceded it. Finn's wound, while painful, proved less serious than feared. The bullet had passed through his shoulder without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Dr. Wilson, summoned from town the morning after the confrontation, had cleaned and bandaged it with brisk efficiency, predicting a full recovery with proper rest. "Which means actual rest, McClellan," the doctor had admonished. "No mucking stalls or breaking horses for at least 3 weeks." Frank Harlow's body had been taken to town, where an inquest quickly ruled the shooting justified given the circumstances. Sheriff Davis's telegrams to the federal marshals had provided ample evidence of Harlow's crimes across the territories, and with multiple witnesses to his assault on the ranch, no one questioned Finn's actions in defense of himself and Olivia. For Olivia herself, The days following Frank's death passed in a strange mixture of grief and relief. Not grief for the man he had become, but for the man she had once believed him to be, for the life she had once hoped they might share. Relief came in small moments, waking without fear, laughing without guilt, allowing herself to imagine a future unburdened by the past. 2 weeks after that fateful night, she sat on the porch of the main house, wrapped in a shawl against the November chill, watching as the first snow of the season began to dust the distant mountains. The sound of the door opening behind her drew her attention, and she turned to see Finn, his arm still in a sling but color returned to his face. "Should you be up?" she asked as he settled carefully into the chair beside her. "Doctor said short walks were good for me," he replied with a small smile. "Didn't specify how short." She returned his smile, noticing how the afternoon light caught in his hair, turning it to burnished gold. "Mrs. Leary will have both our hides if you overdo it." "Worth the risk to sit here with you," he said simply. They fell into comfortable silence, watching as the snowflakes grew larger and more numerous, beginning to stick to the ground around the house. "Sheriff Davis stopped by earlier," Olivia said after a time, "while you were resting." Finn glanced at her, curious. "Oh, what did he want?" "To bring news," she replied, "and papers." She reached into her pocket, withdrawing a folded document. Apparently, Frank had quite a reputation back in Pennsylvania. After news of his death and the circumstances reached his hometown, several people came forward with stories similar to mine. "Can't say I'm surprised," Finn commented grimly. "The local judge there reviewed my case," she continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Given the evidence of Frank's crimes and the testimony from others, he's granted something rarely given." She held up the document. "An official declaration that my marriage was void due to extreme cruelty, effective from the date I fled, as if it never legally existed." Finn's eyes widened slightly. "That's remarkable." "Apparently Judge Wilson has progressive views on a woman's right not to be murdered by her husband," Olivia said with a hint of dark humor. "Davis said it's as good as an official divorce, maybe better. I'm free, Finn. Truly free." The significance of her words hung between them like the snowflakes drifting from the sky, delicate, transformative, full of possibility. "That's wonderful news, Olivia," Finn said softly, his eyes never leaving her face. "How do you feel about it?" She considered the question carefully. "Relieved." "Grateful," she paused, "and a little terrified." "Terrified," he echoed, concerned. "I've spent so long defined by fear, by running, by being Frank Harlow's wife. Even when I was running from him, that's still who I was." She turned to face him fully. "Now I'm just Olivia. And I'm not entirely sure who that is anymore." Finn reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I know who she is," he said with quiet certainty. "She's brave and kind and stronger than she knows. She's someone who can cook a meal that makes a man think of home, even if he's never had one worth remembering. She's someone who looks at a small ranch in Montana Territory and sees beauty where others might see only hardship." His voice softened further. "She's someone I've come to care for more deeply than I ever thought possible." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but they were different from the tears she'd shed the night Frank died. These were tears of possibility, of hope, of a future she was only now allowing herself to imagine. "Finn," she began, but he shook his head gently. "You don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I know it's soon and you're still finding your footing. I just wanted you to know that whenever, if ever you're ready to discover who Olivia is now, I'd be honored to be part of that journey." She squeezed his hand, unable to find words equal to the emotion welling within her. Instead, she leaned across the space between their chairs and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that spoke volumes of gratitude, of affection, of promises not yet voiced but nonetheless real. When they parted, Finn's eyes were bright with emotion. "Does this mean you're staying?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "At Willow Creek, I mean." Olivia smiled, feeling truly light for the first time in years. "Yes," she said simply, "for as long as you'll have me." "That could be a very long time," he warned, though his expression suggested this was far from a problem. "I'm counting on it," she replied. As the snow continued to fall around them, transforming the landscape into something new and unspoiled, Olivia Blackwood felt her heart expand with a feeling she had almost forgotten: hope, pure and undiluted, for all the days to come. Spring came to Willow Creek Ranch in a riot of green, the land awakening from its winter slumber with an enthusiasm that seemed to match the mood of those who called it home. Wildflowers dotted the meadows, calves frolicked on unsteady legs beside their mothers, and the creek that gave the ranch its name ran full and musical with snowmelt from the mountains. Olivia stood in the doorway of what was now officially her cabin, though she spent most nights in the main house these days watching as Finn directed Owen and Patrick in the construction of a new corral. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a small scar as a reminder of that fateful night 5 months earlier. So much had changed since then. The winter had passed peacefully, giving Olivia time to heal in ways that had nothing to do with physical wounds. She had gradually assumed more responsibilities at the ranch, proving herself not just a capable housekeeper, but a shrewd manager with a good head for figures. Finn had been delighted to discover her talent for bookkeeping, declaring her worth her weight in gold when she reorganized the ranch's accounts into something comprehensible. Their relationship had deepened slowly, naturally, like a river finding its proper course. They had taken their time, both recognizing that Olivia needed space to rediscover herself before fully committing to another. Finn had been patient, never pushing, always respectful of her boundaries even as those boundaries gradually dissolved. By Christmas, they were openly courting, much to Mrs. Leary's satisfaction. By February, Olivia had moved most of her belongings into the main house, though she kept the cabin as a personal retreat. And by March, whispers of a spring wedding had begun to circulate among the small community of Silver Creek. Now, as April sunshine warmed her face, Olivia found herself contemplating that very possibility with a sense of peaceful anticipation rather than the fear that might once have accompanied such thoughts. "Admiring the view, Mrs. Leary's voice broke into her reverie as the older woman joined her in the doorway, her knowing eyes following Olivia's gaze to where Finn worked, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. Olivia smiled, not bothering to deny it. "It is a fine view," Mrs. Leary chuckled. "That it is, dear, that it is." She handed Olivia a sealed envelope. "This came for you with the supply wagon. Sheriff Davis sent it over." Curious, Olivia opened the envelope to find a brief note from Davis along with a newspaper clipping from a Pennsylvania paper. The article detailed the final resolution of the Frank Harlow case, the confirmation of the 3 murders he had committed while tracking Olivia, the testimony of other women he had abused, and the judge's unusual but unequivocal ruling that Olivia Blackwood had been legally free of her marriage from the moment she fled for her life. "Thought you might want this for your records," Davis had written. "Congratulations on your upcoming happiness. You deserve it." Olivia felt a sense of completion wash over her as she read the words. The last lingering shadow of her past life had been dispelled, replaced by the bright promise of her future. "Good news?" Mrs. Leary asked, noting her expression. "The best," Olivia confirmed, tucking the papers away. "A final closing of doors that needed closing." Mrs. Leary nodded, understanding. Just in time for new ones to open. Across the yard, Finn had noticed them and was walking over, wiping his hands on a bandana. "Ladies," he greeted with a warm smile. "Plotting something, are you? You both look mighty pleased with yourselves." "Just enjoying the spring day, Mrs. Leary replied innocently. "And I believe I hear bread that needs kneading. I'll leave you two young people to your own devices." With a knowing wink, she retreated into the cabin. Finn raised an eyebrow. "That woman is about as subtle as a bull in a china shop." Olivia laughed. "But we love her for it." "That we do," he agreed, stepping closer and brushing a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "You looked thoughtful when I saw you standing here. Penny for your thoughts." "I was thinking about time," she said, leaning slightly into his touch. "How it changes things. How different I feel now compared to when I first arrived here. Good different, I hope." There was a hint of vulnerability in his question that tugged at her heart. "The best different," she assured him. "I was lost then, Finn. Running from more than just Frank, running from myself, from the possibility that I might never feel safe or whole again." She placed her hand over his where it rested against her cheek. "You gave me that back. Not just safety, but the chance to find myself again." His blue eyes were warm with emotion. "You did the hard work yourself, Olivia. I just provided the space for it." "You provided more than that," she corrected gently. "You provided faith when mine was gone, hope when I couldn't see past my fear, and love." She paused, still sometimes shy about using the word despite the depth of her feelings. "Love when I was certain I'd never feel it again." Finn drew her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. "I do love you, Olivia Blackwood, more than I have words to express." "I love you too," she whispered. "Enough to think that perhaps we shouldn't make Mrs. Leary wait much longer for that wedding she's been hinting about since Christmas." Finn pulled back slightly, his expression brightening. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Olivia nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm saying yes, Finn McClellan. Yes to the question you've been so patiently not asking. Yes to building a life here with you. Yes to all of it." With a whoop of joy that startled the nearby horses, Finn lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle, his laughter mingling with hers in the spring air. When he set her down, his expression was more serious, though no less joyful. "I want to do this properly," he insisted. "With a ring and on one knee the way you deserve." "I don't need all that," she began, but he shook his head. "Maybe not, but I need to give it to you. Because you deserve every happiness, Olivia, every traditional joy that was stolen from you before." She felt tears prick her eyes at his understanding. For all that she had moved forward, there were still moments when she mourned the normal life experiences that Frank had poisoned a proper courtship, a loving proposal, the simple joy of planning a future with someone who cherished rather than controlled her. "All right," she agreed softly. "But know that my answer is already yes, whenever and however you ask." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and passion and future. Right there in the open yard where anyone might see a public declaration of his feelings that would have been unthinkable in her previous life, but now felt perfectly right. "Soon," he promised when they parted, both a little breathless. "Very soon." True to his word, 3 days later Finn suggested an evening ride to watch the sunset from a rise overlooking the ranch. It was a perfect spring evening, the air sweet with the scent of wildflowers and new growth. They rode side by side, comfortable in each other's company, occasionally pointing out signs of the season: a deer with her fawn, an eagle soaring overhead, the first columbines blooming along the trail. When they reached the lookout point, Finn helped Olivia dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. The view was spectacular: Willow Creek Ranch spread out below them, the buildings small but solid, the fields green with new growth, the mountains rising majestically beyond. Beautiful, isn't it? Finn said, standing beside her as they gazed out over their home. Perfect, Olivia agreed, leaning against his side. I used to come up here when I first bought the place, he told her, whenever the work seemed too hard or the loneliness too much. I'd look out at what I'd built and remind myself why it mattered. He turned to face her fully. But it wasn't until you came that it truly felt like home. Olivia's heart quickened as Finn took her hands in his. Finn, let me say this, he requested gently. I've been practicing for days. She smiled and nodded, too moved to speak. Olivia Blackwood, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. When I first saw you in town that day, with that rope scar on your neck, something in me knew that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet understand. All I knew was that I wanted to protect you, to make sure that whatever had caused that scar never happened again. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet pouch. What I didn't expect was how quickly you would become essential to me, not just someone to protect, but someone to admire, to respect, to love more deeply than I ever thought possible. From the pouch, he produced a ring, a simple but elegant band of gold set with a small, perfect sapphire. Then, still holding her hand, he lowered himself to one knee before her. I know your past makes this moment complicated, he continued. I know there are memories and fears that might never fully fade. But I promise you this every day for the rest of our lives. I will work to give you new memories to cherish, new reasons to feel safe and loved and valued for exactly who you are. Tears flowed freely down Olivia's cheeks now, but they were tears of joy, of a happiness so complete it overflowed the boundaries of mere words. Olivia Blackwood, Finn said, his voice strong and clear against the backdrop of the setting sun, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, of building a life with me here at Willow Creek, of allowing me to love you for all the days we're granted together? Though she had known this moment was coming, though she had already given her answer days before, Olivia found herself overwhelmed by the simple perfection of his proposal, by the sincerity in his eyes, by the promise of a future so different from her past that it seemed almost miraculous. Yes, she whispered, then louder with all the certainty in her heart. Yes, Finn McClellan. Yes to all of it. Yes, forever. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the man he was and the husband he would be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, they stood together on the hillside, two people who had found in each other not just love, but healing, purpose, and the promise of a future bright with possibility. And when they returned to the ranch, where Mrs. Leary, Owen, Patrick, and Sheriff Davis, who had just happened to stop by, were waiting with suspiciously knowing expressions and a celebratory dinner already prepared, Olivia felt the final piece of her new life click into place. She was home. She was loved. She was safe. Not just while Finn was there, but always, forever, in the life they would build together. Epilogue: 5 years later, the summer fair in Silver Creek had grown considerably over the years, much like the town itself. What had once been a simple gathering now sprawled across the town square, with competitions, food stalls, games, and a dance that lasted well into the night. It had become the social event of the season, drawing people from ranches and homesteads across the county. Olivia McClellan moved through the crowd with practiced ease, one hand holding tightly to that of a small boy with his father's blue eyes and her chestnut hair. At 3 years old, Thomas McClellan was a bundle of energy and curiosity, constantly tugging his mother toward new sights and sounds. "Mama, look," he exclaimed, pointing toward a pen where several men were showing prized cattle. "Papa's there." "I see him, sweetheart," Olivia replied with a smile, allowing herself to be pulled in that direction. Indeed, Finn stood among a group of ranchers, gesturing toward a handsome bull that wore the Willow Creek brand. The past 5 years had been kind to him. His face was perhaps a bit more weathered from long days in the sun, and there were a few strands of silver at his temples. But he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man content with his place in the world. As they approached, he looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile at the sight of his wife and son. "There's my boy," he called, holding out his arms. Thomas released his mother's hand and ran to his father, who scooped him up effortlessly. "Are we going to win, Papa?" the child asked earnestly, pointing to the bull. "We might at that," Finn replied, ruffling his son's hair. "Samson here's the finest bull in the county, I'd wager." "Don't let Victor Hartley hear you say that," one of the other ranchers joked. "His prize Shorethorn might have something to say about it." "Hartley can say what he likes," Finn replied good-naturedly. "Results speak for themselves." He turned to Olivia, shifting Thomas to one arm so he could slip the other around his wife's waist. "How are you feeling?" "Perfectly well," she assured him, though she placed a hand unconsciously on her swollen belly. At 7 months along with their second child, Olivia glowed with maternal health. "Though your daughter seems determined to practice her dancing today." Finn's expression softened as he placed his free hand beside hers, feeling the baby's movements. "Takes after her mama then," he said with a wink. "Best dancer in the territory." A blush still rose to Olivia's cheeks at his compliments, even after 5 years of marriage. "Flatterer, McClellan." A booming voice interrupted their moment. "That beast of yours better be ready for some real competition this year." They turned to see Victor Hartley approaching, leading a magnificent Shorethorn bull. Despite their rocky beginning, Hartley and Finn had developed something resembling mutual respect over the years, their rivalry in cattle breeding becoming a highlight of the annual fair. "Hartley," Finn acknowledged with a nod. "Fine-looking animal." "Damn right he is," Hartley agreed proudly. "Morning, Mrs. McClellan," he added, tipping his hat to Olivia with more genuine courtesy than he'd shown in their first meeting years before. "Young Thomas, and I see congratulations will be in order again soon." "Thank you, Mr. Hartley," Olivia replied politely. While she would never count the man as a friend, his attitude toward her had improved considerably since her marriage to Finn, and the subsequent growth of Willow Creek Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the county. "Olivia," called a familiar voice, and she turned to see Frances Leary approaching, now walking with the aid of a cane but still spry for a woman in her 70s. "There you are, dear. I've been looking everywhere." "Mrs. Leary," Olivia greeted warmly. Though the older woman had officially retired from her duties at the ranch 2 years earlier, she still lived in a comfortable cottage on the property and remained very much a part of their family. "Is everything all right?" "Perfect, except Sheriff Davis is asking for last-minute entries for the pie contest, and I told him you'd bring yours straight away." She turned to Thomas, her expression softening. "And how's my favorite young man today? I saw a horse jump really high, Granny Frances." The boy exclaimed, launching into a detailed description of the earlier equestrian demonstrations, while Thomas chatted animatedly with Mrs. Leary, and Finn and Hartley resumed their good-natured debate about cattle bloodlines. Olivia took a moment to simply observe, her heart full. 5 years had transformed Willow Creek Ranch from a modest operation to a thriving enterprise. The original buildings had been expanded, new hands hired, the herd nearly tripled in size. The small cabin where Olivia had first stayed now served as Thomas's playhouse, filled with toys rather than the fears and nightmares that had once occupied it. More importantly, 5 years had transformed Olivia herself. The rope scar remained, a pale line around her neck that would never fully fade, but it no longer defined her. These days, she rarely thought of Frank Harlow or the terror she had once lived with daily. Those memories had been replaced by newer, brighter ones: her wedding day in the small church in Silver Creek, the moment she first held Thomas in her arms, countless evenings on the porch with Finn, watching the sunset and planning their future. She still had nightmares occasionally, especially during her pregnancies when she felt more vulnerable. But Finn was always there, his steady presence a reminder that she was safe, loved, protected, not because she couldn't protect herself, but because she no longer had to face life's challenges alone. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. McClellan," Finn said softly, appearing at her side once more. Thomas had moved on to show Mrs. Leary something at a nearby stall, and Hartley had wandered off to attend to his bull. Olivia smiled up at her husband, still moved by the love she saw reflected in his eyes after all these years. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am," she replied. "How different life might have been if I hadn't stopped in Silver Creek that day, if you hadn't seen my scar and said those words." "Not while I'm here," Finn recalled, his voice softening. He reached up to gently trace the mark that circled her neck, a gesture that had once made her flinch but now felt like a caress. "Best promise I ever made, and kept," she added, placing her hand over his. "And will continue to keep," he assured her. "Every day for as long as I draw breath." A sudden commotion from the direction of the judging area drew their attention. "Looks like they're about to announce the winners," Finn observed. "Shall we go see if Samson has earned his blue ribbon?" Olivia nodded, allowing him to guide her through the crowd, his hand protectively at the small of her back. As they walked, she caught glimpses of familiar faces: Owen, now the foreman at Willow Creek; Patrick and his young wife; Sheriff Davis, his hair now completely gray but his stance still straight and strong; Dr. Wilson, who had delivered Thomas and would soon help bring their daughter into the world. These people, once strangers, had become the community she'd never dared hope for during those dark days of running and hiding. They had accepted her, supported her, celebrated with her as she built a new life from the ashes of the old. When they reached Thomas and Mrs. Leary, the boy immediately raised his arms to be lifted, despite his growing independence. "Up, Mama," he requested, and Olivia complied, settling him on her hip despite her advancing pregnancy. "Look at all those people, Thomas," she told him, pointing toward the gathering crowd. "They're all here to see if Papa's bull wins the prize." "Papa always wins," Thomas declared with the absolute confidence of a child who had never known his father to fail at anything important. Finn laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Not always, son, but it's the trying that counts." As the judges began to speak, Olivia found herself only half listening, her attention captured instead by the small family tableau they created: Finn standing proud and tall beside her, Thomas secure in her arms, their unborn daughter making her presence known with a firm kick, Mrs. Leary beaming at them all with grandmotherly affection. This was what healing looked like, she realized. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of joy that made those scars part of a larger story rather than its defining feature. When Finn's name was called as the winner, and Thomas shrieked with excitement while Mrs. Leary clapped enthusiastically, Olivia's heart swelled with pride and love. As Finn accepted the ribbon, his eyes sought hers in the crowd. His smile holding a private message meant only for her, a reminder of how far they had come, and the promise of all that still lay ahead. Later that night, as the fair wound down and the stars emerged in the summer sky, Finn and Olivia swayed together to the music of the fiddles, their bodies close despite her rounded belly between them. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she replied without hesitation. And it was true. The woman who had once feared she might never feel safe again now danced beneath the open sky, her husband's arms around her, her son sleeping peacefully nearby under Mrs. Leary's watchful eye, her future stretching before her bright with promise. The rope scar around Olivia McClellan's neck had faded to a pale line, visible only to those who knew to look for it. But the words that had begun her healing remained as vivid and powerful as the day they were first spoken, a promise kept, a life transformed, a love that had overcome the darkest of pasts to build the brightest of futures. Not while I'm here. Not just a vow of protection, but a declaration of presence, of commitment, of a love that would stand firm against whatever storms might come. And as Finn drew her closer for a kiss, Olivia knew with unshakable certainty that some promises, once made, endured forever.